Hi, welcome to Pugs Tea and the Paranormal, where we dive into a spooky tale over a good cup of tea, and we have two of the cutest little pugs to keep us company while we do it. I'm Leah, and this is Dexter, and over there with the pumpkin is Pootie Bear. So they're going to be keeping us company while we talk about a really creepy true story. Now, if you are into the paranormal like I am, I'm sure you've heard at some point that ghosts are attracted to energy. And this is why we always see ghosts draining battery life from cameras and other electronics in ghost shows, right? But in more sinister cases, ghosts can apparently feed off of people, which just sounds super creepy. And it's said that the darker spirits are attracted to negative energy. In 1988, a young woman moved to San Pedro, California in the hopes of a fresh start. Being a young mother, she was faced with the weight of living alone, the financial and emotional hardships of single parenting, as well as the stress of a new, painful divorce. And with these factors combined, it's said that she may have been the perfect target. For what, you ask? Well, for the dark entity living in her home to start feeding off of. Pootie doesn't like that. "23-year-old Jackie Hernandez had recently separated from her husband Al. Though their marriage didn't work, they were on amicable terms when it came to raising their children. They had a young son named Jamie, and Jackie was pregnant with their daughter when she moved into the small bungalow on 11th Street in San Pedro. She was understandably stressed with working multiple jobs, parenting, and attending school, but she was optimistic about this new start. However, this new chapter in her life would be anything but peaceful when she was faced with what can only be described as a terrifying entity who wanted nothing more than to cause her physical and emotional torment. Over the next few months, she experienced strange voices coming from her attic, objects in the home being moved around, strange knocking from within the walls, and sometimes even a red liquid would seep from them. Now, one of the most intriguing parts about this case is the fact that it was not just Jackie who experienced these paranormal events. This is one of the best documented cases of a haunting, and the encounters were witnessed by multiple people: neighbors, babysitters, Jackie's ex-husband, and investigators. I hope you guys can give me a break. It's my first video, and I was a little bit nervous, and I forgot to show you my tea. I decided to go with a peach dandelion ginger. So cheers. Thank you for being here. So from the very first night, Jackie could sense something peculiar about the house. It had some sort of strange, dark energy to it. It was inexplicable, but she didn't believe that it was haunted at first. She simply chalked it up to the fact that she didn't like being alone, and if anything, she was simply scared of somebody breaking into her house. And she didn't believe that the strange energy was really anything other than anxiety of now being a single parent. And it wasn't until the first incident occurred when she realized that this dark energy she was sensing might be something a little more sinister. Her ex came to live in the house for a couple of weeks after a fire occurred in his home, and it was after his arrival that the first events occurred. One night, when Jackie had a friend over, a pencil holder that had been sitting on a desk was thrown by an invisible force. Al had not touched it, and Jackie and her friend were a couple of feet away. All three of them were witness to this, and none of them had done it. But again, they didn't assume that it was a ghost. They simply thought that it was just a very strange event. But looking back, they realized that this was the first occurrence. It was when Al moved out when the incidents took a really scary turn. Jackie would constantly feel something or somebody watching her and standing behind her, but every time she turned around, of course, there was nothing there. And despite this creepy feeling of being watched, Jackie still wasn't convinced that the house was haunted, even though the events were getting creepier and creepier by the day. For example, in preparation for her daughter's arrival, Jackie got her son a cat. Now, she said that this cat was very calm, very affectionate, and very chill, and that was the reason that she picked this particular one. But whenever the cat would come inside the house, its personality would completely change. It started growling, hissing, and getting aggressive towards nothing that she could even see. It would even arch its back the way that cats do when they're threatened. And when the cat started chasing something around the house, Jackie knew that it was seeing something that she could not. And it wasn't until later that she began seeing the black shadows that the cat had been chasing all along. Every once in a while, these two will look up at the ceiling, bark, growl, do something, and there's nothing there, and it freaks me out to no end. I really don't like when you guys do that. Do you have any comment? No. So with her pregnancy, Jackie would wake up at least once a night to use the bathroom. But in this house, strangely, she began waking up at the exact same time every single night. Like, it didn't matter if she went to bed at 11:30 or 8 p.m. After she fell asleep, she would always wake up at 12 on the dot. And something eerie would always happen in the house at this time. For example, one night at midnight, every window shade in the home shot up simultaneously. And just thinking about that, I would lose my mind if that happened. But that wasn't even close to the worst experience, because it was also at this time. What are you gonna do? It was also at this time when she witnessed her first full body apparition. And I will get into that in just a moment. Shortly after the window shade incident, she began noticing the creepiness of the attic, because of course this house had a super creepy attic, right? The entrance was through this little trap door in the ceiling, which you could only access in the laundry room, and you had to actually stand on the washing machine to reach it and then kind of pull yourself up into it. Now, Jackie started noticing that this trap door would be open when she knew for sure that she had just closed it. Remember, she was the only adult in the house, and her 2-year-old son would not have been able to reach it to open or close it. It also wasn't long before Jackie started hearing what sounded like pebbles being dropped on or into the interior of her walls, and the sounds were clearly originating from the attic. So at first she thought that it was just animals, maybe rats or a raccoon living up there. But then these sounds were soon accompanied by human footsteps. And this is where Jackie realized that she may have been dealing with something that was beyond rational. Maybe something that was paranormal. Pugnormal? There you go. Yeah, that's a peach ginger dandelion tea, I think. I got it on Amazon and it was quite inexpensive. It's by Tetley. I really like it. So it was also around this time when Jackie also began having this terrifying and recurring dream. And in this dream, she would see a young man being attacked with a pipe, with a lead pipe. And his attacker would then drag him down to Sanpedro harbor, where he would pass away in the water. She knew that the dream was located in Sanpedro. She could recognize it. However, it looked to be like it was in the 1930s. And in this recurring dream, Jackie eventually became the victim herself and experienced what the young man had gone through. One night, she awoke from this dream right at midnight as usual. This is where she saw her first full body apparition. The description of this ghost, I can say with 100% certainty, this is the reason why I stay out of my basement at nighttime. Or I make my pugs come down with me, because they will always protect me. She woke up at midnight to use the bathroom, and because the house was so small, she had to cut through her children's bedroom to get there. Now the bedroom is illuminated with a yellow nightlight in the closet, so the room is bright enough for her to see everything. And what she sees is so unsettling. There is a man sitting on the bottom bunk of her son's bed. He was very thin and just sitting there cross-legged. He was grayish looking, and he looked evil and angry at the same time. He was not transparent, but he did not look like a person either. And the look on his face made Jackie very uncomfortable. She said that his skin tone made him look like a corpse. He was wearing gray pants, a red flannel shirt, and workman's boots. Jackie said that he looked like the actor Jack Albertson, though he had this purely evil look in his eyes. For anyone who doesn't know, Jack Albertson is the actor who played Charlie's grandfather in the original Willy Wonka movie. Now, Jackie's son was 4 at the time, and he is sound asleep on the top bunk as this is happening. He has no idea what's going on. Before Jackie can do anything or even rationalize what she's seeing, she looks back and the man has disappeared. Jackie said that she was obviously scared, but at the same time, this was her territory. She was a mama bear, and he was unwelcome as far as she was concerned. She would go on to see this man multiple times, and he would even be witnessed by a neighbor who had been taking a walk one night past her house. She claimed to have seen an old man standing outside of Jackie's house and just staring at her through an open window, only to vanish out of thin air. It was after Jackie's daughter arrived when the activity in the home increased greatly. Jackie had a friend over one night and they were sitting in the living room when all of a sudden they hear this loud crash from the kitchen. There had been a painting hanging near the fridge, and Jackie finds that it had somehow fallen down off of the wall and then landed up on the counter, which was over 5 feet away. It didn't make any sense. In addition, the painting had been hung with 2 nails, and these were now sitting on the floor directly beneath where the painting had been, but they were sitting perfectly upright in a vertical position, meaning their heads were on the floor as if they had been placed there, and Jackie's friend confirmed the story. On another occasion, Jackie and her friend Susan were in the living room when all of a sudden a lamp was violently thrown 7 feet across the room. These occurrences were just the beginning of many that made no physical sense and really made them wonder if they were dealing with a poltergeist. One time, Jackie had a night class, so she hired a babysitter named Tina. Not wanting to scare this poor girl, she doesn't tell her about the weird events that sometimes happened in the house. So Jackie leaves for the night and things were fine at first. But later on in the evening, Tina suddenly gets a weird feeling. She doesn't know why, but she wants to go to the kids' room and check on them. And it wasn't just a natural sense of like, I should go check on the sleeping kids. This was an urgent need that she literally could not explain. So as she is nearing their bedroom, the closed door suddenly opens before she can even get there. It was as if somebody was on the other side and they had slowly pulled it open for her, as if they were saying, "Welcome." She goes into the room and she sees that both kids are fine, they're asleep. So clearly neither of them had opened the door. She simply chalked it up to nothing. She left the room and she closed the door behind her. As she's walking back down the hallway, again, the door slowly opens by itself. Tina isn't too worried. It's just a door that's swinging open, like maybe the house was on a slant or something. Jackie gets home and she asks her how everything went. And Tina tells her about the door, saying, there has to be an explanation for that though, right? And to her surprise, Jackie tells her, well, that's actually a little bit concerning because there's been some other strange events happening. Jackie and Tina talk it over and they decide to leave it alone so as to not bring any more attention to it. Now, to my shock, because I would personally never go back there, Tina comes over again to babysit. And before Jackie leaves, they are standing in the kitchen just talking when suddenly Tina looks up to a corner of the kitchen and she sees this bright light kind of hovering in the corner. And she assumes that Jackie had put a new light in. And Jackie looks up and says, I didn't I didn't install any lights. There's this bright orb moving across the kitchen ceiling. And both ladies knew how strange this was, so they took a picture of it. This was just a bright ball of light moving around on its own with no originating source. So it was very odd. One night after Jamie and Samantha are asleep, Jackie is watching TV in the living room when all of a sudden she looks over and she sees this strange purple mist floating through the window. It comes into the living room like some sort of violet colored cloud. It hovers there for a moment and then it disappears. And Jackie would go on to see this mist multiple times, and in her own words, she said that this spirit would wait for her to be alone before presenting itself because the fear that it created in her would become energy for it to feed off of. So on another occasion, she woke up on the sofa in the middle of the night and she looks over at her dining table, and the terrifying man that she had seen in her children's bedroom was there once again, and he was just sitting there at the table just staring at her. And again, she could feel that this thing's energy was violent and it definitely meant her harm. On this particular occasion, she was so freaked out that she could not get up from the sofa. So instead, she just pulled the covers up over her eyes for a little bit of comfort, hoping that this apparition would disappear as it had done before. But every single time she brought the covers down to take a peek, he was still just sitting there staring right back at her. He sat there for 5 hours, and it wasn't until the sun came up that he finally disappeared. Now, this might be the creepiest part of the story for me. One of Jackie's friends had also recently moved to San Pedro, and she told Jackie that she had gone up into the attic of her house one day, and to her shock, she had found some money that had been stashed up there by previous owners. Jackie thought that it was worth taking a peek into the attic to see, obviously, if maybe she could find some money as well. Her friend Chrissy was there at the time that this happened, so while she waited in the laundry room, Jackie opens the creepy trapdoor in the ceiling to take a look. As she's looking around, she can immediately feel eyes on her. It was as if somebody was standing right behind her. She turns around, she sees nobody. The attic is empty, but she couldn't get past the intense feeling that there was definitely somebody up there. Out of nowhere, she sees the head of a man appear. She described it as a chubby man whose head started at the far side of the attic and it came directly at her. She was so scared that she didn't even have time to think or process this. Her legs just give out from underneath her from fear, and she falls off the washing machine and into the laundry room below. Understandably, Jackie isn't really doing well at this point. She knows that something strange is going on, and whatever it is not afraid to visit with her and her children, which was the most alarming part. But she is still hesitant to get anybody involved other than Al and her close friends. She doesn't want people to make fun of her or obviously think that she's crazy. One night, she's out with her friend Susan and they're talking about all of the events that have been happening in the house. And they just so happen to run into Jackie's landlord. And at this point, Susan is very concerned about her situation. So she kind of bombards Jackie's landlord and she says, "Hey, there is some really weird stuff going on in that house." And instead of laughing at them, the landlord, who happened to be very religious, actually asked for permission to have some priests come over to the house to bless it. And Jackie, of course, agrees to this, but this is where she ran into some trouble. Because when the priests come to the house, they find a home that is in complete disarray. But you also have to remember that this was a single mother working full-time, going to college, and raising 2 babies while she was doing it, all while dealing with not only a separation, but what she thinks is a potential haunted house. However, given everything about the situation and the state of the house, the priests end up reporting her to Child Protective Services, and on top of it, saying that she believes there are ghosts there. Child Protective Services come to the house and they basically tell Jackie to get your stuff in order. That's it. So of course she does. So obviously the priest route didn't go anywhere, and Jackie's feeling really low at this point. She thinks, nobody can help me, nobody believes me, I have no idea what to do. And this is when her friend suggests that they call some paranormal investigators, because they really don't have anything to lose at this point. And for anybody wondering, at this point, Jackie would have been out of that house in a heartbeat, but she did not have the means to do so. She had no money. She couldn't just pack up and leave. She had 2 babies, and a roof over their head was still better than nothing. So, calling an investigative team really was her last option. On August 18th, 1989, a team made up of Dr. Barry Taff, Barry Conrad, and Jeff Wheatcraft come to Jackie's home to interview her and hopefully capture some proof of the paranormal. This was a professional team of researchers who were highly skeptical and believed that most paranormal cases were complete fabrication or just full of embellishment. The leader of the team, Dr. Barry Taff, was a veteran investigator who had worked on over 3,000 paranormal cases and was also the associate director of the parapsychology lab at UCLA. Now, a few of Jackie's friends were there for support during the investigation, and Al had come over as well, but he stayed in the bedroom with the kids just to keep them busy while the investigation was going on. So Jackie tells them about all of the experiences that she had been having and how her friends were able to corroborate all of it. She shows them the areas in the house that seemed to get the most activity, especially the attic, where she had witnessed the disembodied head. The investigators felt, as soon as they come into the home, very uncomfortable, and they described it as if they were deep underwater, as if an unseen pressure were actually compressing them down. And after hearing about the floating head, Jeff, who was described as being the most skeptical of them all, was pretty interested, and he decided to take a look up in the attic for himself. So he gets up on the washing machine to look, and he starts taking pictures with the flash on his camera. And when he comes back down, he says that without a doubt, his animal instincts had been triggered. He had felt somebody watching him from behind. And this was exactly how Jackie had felt whenever she looked up in the attic. Despite this though, he didn't feel like it was supernatural. It was just a very creepy feeling. So Jeff came back down, and that was when Barry had an idea. He suggested that Jeff go back up and pretend to take some pictures in front of him, but then quickly take some pictures over his shoulder to see if he could capture something that may have been lurking behind him. Now, Jeff is skeptical of this whole thing, but he agrees to do this. So he climbs back up and he starts taking pictures over his shoulder while everybody waits in the laundry room below. While this is going on, Al is in the bedroom with the kids. As he's laying on the bed, he hears, clear as day, a male voice whisper right in his ear, and it says, "Get them the hell out of here." And Al said that this voice was so clear that he turned and he responded to it, saying, "Oh, I can't, it's not my house," because he actually thought that it was one of the investigators who had come into the room. That was how clear this voice was. Al was still skeptical of the house actually being haunted, but he could never explain this clear, disembodied voice. And it was only minutes after this when Al and everybody else hears Jeff screaming from up in the attic. Jeff is in a state and he is climbing down as fast as he can. Now he explains that something grabbed the camera out of his hands, and the force was so strong that it felt like something had actually tied a rope around his camera and pulled it away from him. And whatever had grabbed it then threw the camera across the floor. In an interview about this, Jeff said the following: "I went upstairs, I started clicking off some photos. I fired first, second, and just as I fired into the third frame, something pulled this camera from my hands. I had it over my shoulder and something just pulled the whole camera out. It felt like somebody had taken the lens barrel of the camera and just pulled it. I was shocked. I went downstairs immediately, and then I'm down there thinking, of course, expensive camera. I have to go back up and get it. I go back up there with a flashlight and I don't see my camera in the position that I was. I look back in the corner of the attic and I see just the lens sitting there. In the other corner of the attic, 15 or 20 feet away, was the body of the camera lying upside down in an old crate. Whatever had taken my camera out of my hands had separated the lens from the body. That alone is no easy feat because you have to know a little bit about cameras. You can't simply pull it off. There's a lock and you turn the lock in position. I knew there had to be something in the attic to do that. Throughout this whole case, I tried to rationalize what actually did that. I knew that there was nothing in the attic. There was nobody up there. There wasn't somebody standing in the corner. It was not a hoax. There wasn't somebody waiting for me. So everybody is now gathered in the kitchen to talk about the night's events so far, and this is when everybody can hear these clear, loud footsteps walking above them in the attic. Everyone knows there's nobody up there, and everyone in the house is currently accounted for. Barry Taft said that it sounded as if a 200-pound rat was running around up there. Jackie said at this point that the whole atmosphere changed because it was no longer just an interview. Like, this was now something that was actually happening. Everybody in the house could hear it, and it was spooky. Jeff said the following: "We're in the kitchen, and all of a sudden we hear these heavy footsteps. Boom, boom, boom. We all thought that it was outdoors at first, but if you listen carefully, it was directly above us. I got up on the washing machine and I looked back up into the attic. I'm looking up and I see 3 bright flashes of light. The first 2 are about the size of a coffee can lid and probably 15 feet away from me. The third flash of light was larger, about the size of a basketball. Now, I know flashes of light because I'm a photographer. The flashes were slow, like an 1/8 of a second, maybe a 1/10 of a second. After the 3 flashes, I see a black mass moving in the attic. It's like if you took 3 men and covered them with a huge black velvet cloth. That was how it moved slowly across the attic. Then it simply dissipated. There was enough light being reflected up there that I know it was something black and it was moving. The 3 flashes of light made no sound. The black mass made no sound. He went on to talk about how every time they tried to film video up in the attic, the batteries in their cameras would simply die. And in addition, whenever they tried to interview Jackie, the lights that they would plug in would also flicker and die. So the next event was another physical one, and it happened again when Jeff was up in the attic and he was looking down into the laundry room. As he's looking down, he feels a force start to push on his back, and he described it as a huge hand just pushing him. There was nobody behind him up there. He was completely alone. But he could feel each finger and the palm, and it was clearly some kind of entity pushing down on him. And Jackie knew exactly what he was talking about because she had also experienced this hand pushing her, describing it as a large skeletal hand 5 times the size of a human's. She said it would cover your entire back and you could clearly feel the imprint of the fingers. In Jeff's own words, "I'm by the trap door and I'm bringing the camera up that Barry is handing to me. I set the camera down on the attic floor and all of a sudden I feel this pushing on my back. Barry is wondering what I'm doing because all of a sudden I'm just being pushed down. It felt like a huge bony hand was pushing my back with this tremendous pressure. I didn't dare look behind me. I was frightened. Right before this happened, we had problems with the camera. We had just put a new battery in and it still would not turn on. The camera never did come back on in that attic. It only went on when we went back downstairs. After being pushed, I had my back examined by a chiropractor because it bothered me the next few days. He examined me and he found internal bruising. Now at this point, the team had been there for hours and it was simply time to leave. I really don't think Jackie wanted them to go because I wouldn't either, but they had to call it a night. And then a couple of weeks later, Jackie ended up being attacked by invisible hands that she said choked her and threw things, including a can of Coke, at her head. And this was the last straw for her. She grabs her children and she runs to the neighbor's house where she calls the investigators. And she leaves them this absolutely frantic message, just begging them to come back and help her. It was after the franticness of this call that the team agreed to go back. So they get to the house and they do their best to calm her down. And Jackie tells them that the sounds from the attic have been getting worse. They've been getting a lot louder. And events have simply been getting more intense. And this time, the team was even witness to the mysterious red ooze that Jackie had reported that sometimes came out of the walls. They took a sample of it and they sent it to UCLA, where the forensics lab determined that the liquid was human blood plasma. So Gary and Jeff decide to go back up into the attic to check it out. Understandably, Jeff is pretty hesitant to go back up there, but he knows that he has to because the attic really seems to be the source from which this entity is living or coming from, right? He heads up there once again, and keep in mind, they don't have lights with them this time. They don't have as much equipment because this was really more of just a courtesy call to Jackie because of how scared she was. So they go back up there with just one camera and just one flashlight, and they find that the attic is exactly how they had left it. It was completely empty except for this one fruit box in the corner. So there was nothing for anybody to hide in. There was nothing for anybody to hide something in, nothing. It was completely empty. There's simply nothing happening up there. When all of a sudden, everybody downstairs starts freaking out. And they're saying there's something happening down here. There's something happening in the living room. Apparently, Barry had seen a strange, unexplainable red light, which had started moving across the living room, and then it disappeared into a curtain. So Gary and Jeff start moving back towards the attic door to go down and check this out. And as Gary is about to climb down, he hears Jeff behind him drop his flashlight and he starts yelling. Now, I have watched the video of this, and the way that Jeff yells out is just... there is something so eerie. The only way I can really describe it is like if you have ever experienced something so frightening that you couldn't physically let out a scream or an intimidating sound. Do you know what I mean? Like the only yell that you could produce was kind of like a muffled or confused noise simply because of how scared you were. That is what I think Jeff sounded like. Anyway, Gary can't see Jeff because he dropped the flashlight, right? But in the dark, he can see Jeff's white shirt, and he can clearly see that he is not standing up straight. He is kind of standing like on this weird, uncomfortable looking 45-degree angle. And he quickly snaps a picture with his camera, and you're probably wondering why. Why would he do that instead of running over to Jeff to help him? Well, it was because he couldn't see anything. And the attic is so small with these large beams coming down on either side. He couldn't just rush over. Like he had to tread pretty carefully up here. So he was using the flash on his camera to see around him. And he snapped one of the most infamous pictures in paranormal hunting history. I'll put it up on the screen, but I will also describe it here. So Jeff is wrapped around one of the boards that are coming down from the ceiling. There is no expression on his face. He just has this blank look. He's just very out of it. And when Gary gets over to him, he says that Jeff contradicted himself. At first, Jeff relaxed and he let go of the beam so that Gary could help him. And he yelled out, "There's something on my neck. There's something on my neck, Gary." So Gary puts his hand on Jeff's neck, but he doesn't think he can feel anything. Jeff then gets angry and he tells him, "No, there's nothing on my neck. There's nothing on my neck." And that was when Gary actually did feel something around his neck, which was a rope. Now this rope is attached to and hanging him from a nail on the rafter. And this rope around Jeff's neck is so tight that Gary has to bend the nail down to get Jeff off of it. Gary did not believe that Jeff could have done this to himself. Like, with how fast this occurred, especially, and they found this out later after doing a really close investigation of the attic. There were only 2 nails sticking out where this rope could have been attached to. In the entire attic, there were only 2. So for Jeff to have found one of them, found this rope, tied the rope around his neck, crawled over the boards that came down from the ceiling, stood up, got his legs around the board, hung himself, and then called out for help, all in the span of just a couple of seconds. Like, the timeline just did not add up. And everyone agreed Jeff did not have enough time to do this to himself. And another thing that really stood out to Gary was the fact that Jeff had been wearing these brand new expensive glasses. And he had been talking about these glasses on their car ride over because they were new and he liked them. And in the hanging event, these glasses flew off of his face, landed on the floor, and were damaged. So I just have to say that the video that shows Jeff crawling to the attic entrance after this event is just beyond eerie. Like, you can see the look of horror and just pure confusion on his face. So either Jeff was a really good actor, or something terrifying had just happened to him, and it was written all over his face. And this is what happened in Jeff's own words, which is beyond. Just listen. "As we were about to go down, I remember I took one step and something pulled me. There was a momentary space where everything went black. The next moment I remember is waking up, if you want to call it that, and I see Gary standing in front of me. I feel myself over to the side of the attic roof, close to the rafter, and I'm being pulled really tightly from around the neck. I know there was something around my neck, but I didn't know what it was. He helps me off of this nail. I do not remember being lifted up there, but I was actually hung. We went downstairs and I remember seeing the red marks around my neck. The rope turned out to be an old plastic clothesline, which we later found out was tied in a special knot called a bowling knot, which was actually a seaman's knot, a knot typically used by sailors. The clothesline was not fresh, wasn't new. It was dried and yellow. We had examined every inch of that attic floor, and there was nothing. No rope, no twine, no clothesline on that floor. That is what was so strange. I don't even remember walking from the position that I was hung in to go downstairs. All I remember is that I had to get out of that attic. I never went back in that attic again. I don't think I could go back there today. It just had such an impact on me. I was so frightened. I was shaking. And the strange thing is that piece of time that everything went black. I don't remember what mechanically or what physically happened to my body. It just happened so fast. I felt like my life was threatened. I have been asked many times if I think I was the victim of a hoax. I like to think that maybe it was, but I know it wasn't. We inspected every bit of that attic. It was a small house. It was not a house with all kinds of cavernous places and hidden trapdoors. Another thing you have to remember is that the woman who lived there had 2 small children. She did not have a tremendous income, and I don't really think she'd have the knowledge to put together something like this to try and pull the wool over our eyes. People are accusing us of that, and I guess that's the easiest way to try and get out of it, but it's just not that simple. What we went through actually happened. I can't explain it. People think it's a fantasy or a big hoax. It's not. We would have seen that. We would have noticed that. It just isn't true. Downstairs, the crew examined his neck and they found deep red burn marks on his skin. So as already mentioned, this night, it was the last straw for Jackie. She got out of that house and she tried to make things work with her ex-husband. They ended up moving to Weldon, California for another fresh start, and for the first couple of months, everything seemed to be going well. But after a few months, the relationship started to crumble, and this was when the entity reappeared. At first, Jackie could hear these terrifying scratching sounds coming from their shed outside, and this was unaccompanied by shadows, orbs of light, and a black mist that would float through the house. On one occasion, 2 of her neighbors were helping her move a TV when all of them saw the reflection of the same terrifying man staring at them in the corner of the TV. And when they turned around, of course, there was nobody there. Jackie called Taft's team once again and she asked them to come to her new home. And when they get there, they actually decide to use a Ouija board this time to try and communicate with the entity that had clearly followed Jackie to her new home. And before the seance could even begin, temperatures in the trailer dropped to almost freezing levels. And the candles that they had lit for light blew out when there had been no noticeable breeze inside. They started the seance and apparently ended up getting some pretty creepy answers. Now, they started out with the most typical questions that you would expect, right? Such as, is there someone here? And are you a ghost? Jeff and Barry had their hands on the planchette, and each time they asked a question, it would move and hover over yes. Some of the open-ended questions that they asked and got answers for were as follows. How long have you been trapped here? The answer, 60 years. Did you die in the house? Referring to the house in San Pedro. The answer, no. Where did you die? The answer, San Pedro Bay. Did you drown? No. I was held underwater. Did you live in the San Pedro house? No. My murderer did. I had legitimate shivers while I was researching this case, but the answers to the Ouija board questions just... Barry asked this entity why it had tried to kill Jeff in the attic, and the entity responds with, because he resembles my killer. Barry asked why it attached itself to Jackie, and it responds with one creepy word, energy. They ask it, what type of energy? And the answer was dead energy. And they assumed that dead energy meant just the negative energy that was emanating from Jackie due to the stress and the problems that she was having in her life when she moved into the house. It was now clear to all of them that whatever this thing was, it was not connected to the house, but it had become attached to Jackie while living there. After questioning it about the dead energy, Jeff was attacked once again. He was picked up out of his chair and thrown into a wall behind him, and this was witnessed by the entire team. He said it was like being hit by a huge boxing glove, and when he hit the wall, it was then that he realized just how strong this entity was. Luckily, he did not lose consciousness, and when his team helped him get up, all he wanted was to desperately get out of that trailer. But the strange thing was that as soon as he got outside, he felt that something was compelling him to go back in. Once back inside, they said that the trailer had become even colder than before, and this was a time when it was not cold outside. They lit a fire that did not warm the place up at all. Just like in the attic, their video camera and audio recorder died during this event. Jeff said, I wish we had had this thing on tape. If the camera would not have failed, we would have had this thing on tape. But you know what? Even if we had had it recorded, somebody would have accused us of rigging the thing like they always do. There's just no way around that. They have to believe us. It's true. It happened. So after getting these answers during the seance and putting that together with the horrible nightmares that she'd been having, Jackie now decided that she needed to do some digging. She researched the sanpedro home, specifically looking for any deaths that had occurred there or in the area. She found an old newspaper article from March 25th, 1930 that reported on the death of a man named Herman Hendrickson. He was a seaman and he had been found floating under a pier in San Pedro Bay. His death had been ruled accidental, but everything about him had fit the details of what the entity had told them during the seance. This even included a large cut on Herman's forehead that looked like an attack wound, possibly from a pipe. Jackie also found information on a man named John Damon who had built the bungalow. She believes that this was the man that she saw sitting on her kid's bed that night after the nightmare, and he was just possibly angry that she was in his house. Also, after doing some digging of his own, Barry Conrad believed that he had found the killer of Herman Hendrickson. After digging through countless newspapers, he finally found an article about a man named Charles Pearson who had a bad reputation with a violent temper in the San Pedro area. And most importantly, he looked a lot like Jeff Wheatcraft. It was only a belief that he may have actually been the killer. It was never proven. So Jackie moved several more times, and she found that with each move, the paranormal occurrences got less and less severe until finally they stopped altogether. Interestingly, it definitely seems like Jackie was not the only one who experienced something negative in the house at 593 West 11th Street. Multiple other occupants who moved in would move out within a month, claiming that their leaving was due to the strange happenings in that house. I really hope that you enjoyed this video. Please like it and share it maybe with a fellow ghost enthusiast, and subscribe because we will be posting here once a week. We would love to hear from you in the comments, and if you have any spooky story or topic suggestions, please leave them down below. I would love to hear them. Other than that, thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for listening, and we will see you in the next one. Take care. Bye.